I talked about this in the Dr. Z's Facebook. There was a thread on there. We were talking about upgrading to the latest version of Tasmota. And I mentioned how do it over through MQTT commands. So I wanted to show real quick how to do that. There's a few ways you can do it. Now, typically, and I've mentioned this before, that I usually compile my own kind of, it's not the minimal ones, the bin file, but it's more the minimal. I cut out a lot of the different sensors and stuff and have a couple configurations already set in there for me, like my time zone and latitude, longitude for doing the dusk to dawn stuff and various things. So I'm going to show you, I've upgraded a couple of them, and this is my development. I had just a little simple panel which pulls in the firmware version that comes over through the console. And I've done a couple of them here. You can see a 6301. Most of my other stuff is all 62117s. And I have a console here showing so we can see what's going on. And I have a simple automation that I'll trigger, which causes a poll to go over the MQTT. So one way you can do it is if you do your own firmware, which is I'm going to show. But all you got to do if you want to use the regular releases, you won't have to do this step with a little firmware server. You'll just use the one that Tasmota has, and we'll just replace the URL with that. And you could even also, if you want to live dangerously and upgrade all of your Tasmota devices with some of the latest nightly builds that they build every time they make commits and changes, they automatically build new bin files. You could use that URL as well. Whatever URL you want, that you can use. Now keep in mind if you have any if you have any devices that are on the 5.x version, because of the program flash size, you're not able to do the one step on those. You will need to get those up to at least the 6.x version that allows you to do the one-step flash without having to first flash the minimal and then the other sides. So first, what I'm gonna do if you look in, we'll open another in Tasmota. There is, if you pull down the entire branch of Tasmota, there is in the tools folder, they have included, and this is another cool piece I haven't mentioned, is there's a Python script that'll actually read in your backed up configuration files if you're curious of what settings and stuff you put in there. It's a cool little piece. But there is one called firmware server, and it's a Python file, and let me pull that over here. Let's see if I can find a window. Minimize this. And the usage of it is pretty simple. They tell you if you open up the actual Python file, you have to have Python 3 installed. And if you don't have them installed, you try to run it, it'll tell you, gives you an error. But you can just run this command, the pip install net ifaces and then Flask, all one. It'll install those libraries in Python. And then the usage is you can do firmware server Python. If you know the device of your Ethernet device you're going to want the devices to connect to, you can put that. Or if you just know the IP address of, say, your Wi-Fi card or your Ethernet connection on your computer, you just specify the IP address. And I'm going to specify the IP address. And then it'll show you the actual path you'll use. So where you put the path bring this up here. If you also have to put your firmware you want in the FW folder. And you see I have my firmware.bin file in there. And the command is, my Python for some reason wants to act funny, so I have to specify the thing, even though I do have it in my full path. I'll deal with that later. You put fwserver.py-i and then your IP address. You hit enter, and it's going to show you now it's running on HTTP 192.168. I'm about to be 158, and it does port 5000. So just to test it, if we want to do HTTP colon 192.168.1.58 5000 firmware.bin, it should pull this, and I can see it in the bottom. It did download the actual firmware file. And if you flip back to the Python window, you can see actually this IP address did a get of firmware bin, and it served up the firmware bin file, so you can see your requests. So of course that step, you don't need that step if you're using the regular releases. If you're using the regular releases, you'll be, just keep in mind, you'll be replacing the regular releases. You can grab them from this site, because you can't use HTTPS like off of GitHub with your ESP devices, because they just don't simply have the memory for it. So you can get the URL if you're going to use the regular releases, this, like the recent release to 6.30. You'll grab this link here when we're going to put in the OTA URL. You'll actually use this exact link if you just copy link address and copy that to your clipboard. But I'm going to use that little firmware server. So just keep that in mind. So what you'll want to do is, as long as you haven't changed what they call the group topic, there's the group topic, and you've probably seen it, but you never paid attention to it. It's when you first restart a Sonoff device or Tasmota, and sorry if I interchange those quite a bit, you'll see it says group topic Sonoffs at the top. As long as you haven't changed that, and you can create multiple groups, but like say you had different types of devices. With some of them you ran the all sensors binary because you had a bunch of sensors on them, different sensors. You of course wouldn't want to flash the regular Sonoff bin file to it, because then it would drop all your sensors. So those, you may want to change the group topic on those. And you can change the group topic in the configuration. You may want to do like Sonoff sensors or something like that. That way you don't change them. So what that Sonoff's group topic does, it's a very powerful group topic on MQTT. So if you go into Home Assistant, and right here to the left of the info graphic on the developer tools, if you click MQTT, you can put in a topic. Yeah, Bobby, that it should be, but the link should always be the same, I would assume. But what I would do is always reference the Tasmota main page README, and they're always going to update if something changes with the server name. They'll update this README, and you'll just use that instead. And if you do want the development code base, you can see they do talk about it here. Down here they say, this web address can be used for OTA as well, and those are the hourly ones that they build, and you can use those too. So, but I always reference the main page on the GitHub. You can always find the latest, because as things change with videos and whatnot, you'll just always want to come here. This is as of 6.30 is the one they have now. So, So back in Home Assistant, you can actually change, and this doesn't just apply to OTA stuff. You can do any of the commands for Tasmota using that Sonoffs group topic. And the way you do that is you cmnd/Sonoffs/ and then your command. And a real funny one, and of course you wouldn't want to do this if you're going to drive somebody else crazy. You could send over to the power and just send a payload of toggle, or you could do a 1, and that would actually, every single Tasmota device you have on your MQTT, it would actually toggle the power on it all at one time. So of course, if you wanted, you could turn them all off at once or turn them all on at once. You could do, send a 1, or I believe it'll also allow on and off. But I'm not going to do that. But what we want to do is, I want to send over the command for the OTA URL. So it's OTA URL, and like I mentioned before, I'm going to put my own using that little firmware server, but the payload will be whatever path you need for if you whatever release you're trying to flash on it. And remember, it has to be HTTP. So mine is that address of HTTP 192.168.1.58.5000 firmware.bin. And then make sure this is on console so we can see. So you just paste that in or type it, grab whatever release you want. Make sure your cmnd/Sonoffs OTA URL, that's the command, and I grabbed that straight from here, from this Tasmota wiki, from the commands page, and hit publish. And that's going to publish to any of the Tasmota devices with that group topic of Sonoffs. And that's the default one unless you've changed it. So just to show you, now we can see on this one S20 I have, you can see the command. It did a command of OTA URL, HTTP, firmware bin. And that actually, if I would flip over to any other devices, like, it would actually have the same exact thing, because I just sent that to all of my Tasmota devices. So the next thing you can do, what we'll do is, if you scroll down the commands, you'll find there's upgrade, and then we do 1. And now keep in mind, this is going to flash all of your devices all at one time. So if you're not comfortable on that, don't do it. I've done this before. Just depends on how good, how comfortable you are with your devices, flash them all at once. So here's my little firmware server. We'll go over here and change. The payload is going to be 1, and I want to do upgrade. And we're going to send publish. And cross our fingers, right? We'll send publish. I'll flip over, and you can actually see now all of these devices just pulled the new firmware all at one time from that little firmware server. And we'll give them a second to download the firmware and flash it to themselves. And we'll flip back over to my Home Assistant development page. Go to overview. I can hear a couple clicking, rebooting. You can actually see some of these going unavailable from the messages from the LWT. These are all rebooting. Now, if we did leave them, you can say, well, why is it coming back up with the wrong firmware? Well, the message I'm grabbing from only gets published on the telemetry 5-minute default update. So what I have to do is we could just wait and they'll slowly start popping in, but we're not going to sit here and wait. I have an automation that sends those, that makes it force that command. It publishes to all Sonoffs. So we'll just trigger that, and boom. Now you can see every single one of my Tasmota devices are all flashed with 6301. And just to check, 6301. Let's see, let's do this one. 1.4. And there we are. We can see 6301. To check a few of them here. And no issues. We're all showing 6301. So with what you've learned here is you can do more with that. More than you just say, you just wanted to do whatever configuration. Now keep in mind, when you do that one command, it's going to do the command to all of them. So of course you wouldn't want to send a host name and change the host name to every single one. But say for instance you wanted to update the clock server, NTP server. If you wanted to upgrade and change I know this was asked, was because I used the web server password, and it's not any crazy password. It's just really stupid password. On all of my Tasmota devices, and that's just really a stopgap for when I'm pushing new firmware to my Unify access points. They'll fall off the network and they'll flip into access point mode for a little bit during that upgrade. And I didn't want either through some other means something grabbing those access points or maybe someone grabbing them and doing a factory default or whatever to any of my devices. So I just have a web password as a stopgap. You can send over, if you want to start using the web password, you could send over the commands to all your Sonoff devices. And what I would do on one device before you send over any commands like that, because of course you're doing it all at one time, is I would go to the console and try out your commands that, say if you're going to do a web password, try out that command on just one switch first. If you want to try out the OTA upgrade we just did on one switch, just fine, perfect. And before you jump in, in the deep end and do them all at one time. So whatever commands you want to do, you need to send the power retain to all switches at one time. We could come in here and say you forgot to do power retain and you want power retain. You could send all this command Sonoff's power retain with a 1, and that would send to all of your switches. And keep in mind, like I said before, all devices that are on that Sonoff's default topic, it'll send the command of that power retain. But you can see it's a really powerful way to go through and change. If you want some configuration you want to change on all of your Tasmota devices, you can change them all at one time, and it'll do them all at once. So other than that, I'm gonna flip back and look at the chat and see what I missed. Yeah, that's the firmware. If you will be able to go afterwards and roll the video back. That is, there's a little firmware server that actually comes with Tasmota on the full branch package you can get off of. It's right here, there's a tools section. If you just want to download the whole, you can either do a clone of it or you can, download it. In the tools section, there's a firmware server. And there's also this, like I mentioned before, this decode config. That'll actually decode your configuration files, like a backed up configuration file if you forgot something you stated in there. But this is that firmware server. And I use that just because I compile my own kind of minimal bin files. But of course, you don't need that if you just want to use the this one here in their README. If you go to here and use this sonoff.bin, and the reason why we can't use the one that's actually, you say, well, why can't we use the one where we normally go in releases and download them? Well, if you'll notice, if you highlight over it, and you copy the link address, it would come back as HTTPS. And the ESP chips just don't have the way to use the HTTPS because they just don't simply have the memory and flash size in those 1 meg chips to do HTTPS. So, but you won't need, if you're going to use the regular releases, you'll just use the regular. You don't need that firmware server. Any pointers to stop yours from switching on and off? The number one, now when they're going, you're saying they're switching on and off. Are you talking about are they actually going unavailable? Or are they rebooting? Because the number one thing I've seen with that, and it's a great tool for some cases, I don't run it all the time, is that Tasmo admin. Is especially I noticed on my S31s, and probably due to those S31s are also doing those power monitoring, and it was causing the watchdog restarts. And if you looked at when it was rebooting, and it would say restart reason, like watchdog restart or something like that, and come to find out it was Tasmo admin constantly polling the devices, and it was causing those devices to reboot. So as soon as I turn off Tasmo admin, they stop rebooting. It's hanging for a few seconds. That could be a multitude of things. If it's doing it multiple switches, it could be multitude of things, whether it's a Wi-Fi signal issue or if you're doing you may want to try just do a sleep 0. Make sure you don't have any sleep commands. Sleep 0 is not a bad thing. I usually use like a sleep 5. It does help the device keep its power consumption down. Not that it uses much, but I have had some even Sonoff Basics have issues. Even with the regular official firmware had, I guess, just some of the way it was manufactured, it didn't like the sleep command. It would hang. So I had to use sleep 0 on those. So give that a shot. Other than that, wanted to pop in, do a real quick thing on showing you how to do the Sonoff's group topic. Be careful with it. It's a real powerful command. You can mess up all your Tasmota devices in a quick heartbeat. Or you can make them all the same, and you definitely don't want to do that. So test it on one switch first, and then you can hit all your other ones. I've used it several times to to upgrade all my Sonoff devices or Tasmota devices all at once, like we just did here. And other than that, you guys, I've got a bunch of other stuff to do to the day, but I'll be available on the Discord off and on, or the Facebook page. Hit me up. You got any questions, or you got any different ideas of what you could do with the Sonoff's group topic? I appreciate it, and y'all have a good weekend, and thanks for watching.